Welcome back to another one of your Flip lectures. Today we're going to talk about politics, or more accurately, who gets what, when, and how. So the first thing we should talk about is what is politics. And what politics is it is a peaceful means of determining who gets both resources and power in a society without violence, and also how those resources and that power is going to be used. Now, when I talk about power, what power is the ability to get people to do what you want, to compel them, to force them to do what you want them to do. And authority is right power, the power that basically citizens believe is legitimate. The idea that there is a law in the book saying that murder is illegal, and you give the authority to the state of Illinois to basically decide that law and enforce it. When we talk about politics, primarily we're talking about government. And government is a social order. And what social order means, it's simply how we organize our collective lives, how we organize the spaces of our life in which we need to live together with other human beings. And government is a system or an organization that exists to exercise power over a group of people. This government can provide services, it can protect individual rights, whatever that society decides is important, and it also helps organize people to work and live together, and this usually means live together in peace. And the study of government primarily has to do with things like rules and laws. And rules and laws are the how of how resources get distributed, and collective action we do together, will take place or not take place. And so rules and laws, they mean that actions are either mandated, means that you have to do these things, or you are prohibited from doing those things. For example, this would be things that are illegal. And our laws, they really determine our experience as citizens, the way that we experience everyday life in this country. Imagine if you changed the rule of basketball, saying that you could not dribble the ball, or you made stealing legal in a society. Imagine how much different the experience would be, either of playing the game or of living everyday life. And politics also concerns the enforcement of the law, which is the exercise of power. And in this case, a government will use police or military power in order to enforce laws. If you murder somebody, it's the job of the police to arrest you and put you behind bars. Also, there's self-regulation, that most people simply choose to obey the law, even if there's a little chance that they'll be caught. And then also enforcing the law includes a justice system, a way to judge whether or not laws have been violated. And this system can be fair, or it could also be not fair. But every government has to have a justice system. To facilitate all of these exercises of government power, the government creates what are known as institutions. And these are organizations or groups where that government power is exercised. A good example would be the mayor's office or the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, where you have to go in order to get a license or kind of do other things that are really an exercise of state power. You also have the police station, the White House. Hopefully you get the idea of what these institutions look like. So when you think about government, a good place to start is how can these governments be organized? How can they be set up? And there's two main distinctions in governments. There are authoritarian governments where the ultimate power lies within the state, the government, which will oversee and exercise power in every access of citizens' lives. A good example of authoritarian governments would be the Nazis during World War II, in which every part of life was ultimately controlled and regulated by the government. A non-authoritarian government is where the ultimate power to make decisions about our lives lies with individuals to make their own decisions. A good example of a non-authoritarian government would be the United States, in which the government does not mandate every part of our lives. We're able to choose, to a certain extent, how we live our lives, and that is the power that we have in a non-authoritarian government. Usually we call this freedom. So what kind of government does the United States have? The United States is set up as a democratic republic. It is democratic because of democracy. In democracy, the government is the people, where the authority does not come through a monarch or from God, but it comes through the idea that the people all agree to a system of government. This is called the social contract, where citizens agree to give up all of their freedom to better protect their important freedoms, or we call these rights, of the entire community. So the idea is that you freely choose to obey laws. And so because of that, you decide the laws that are made through your elected officials. The United States also has popular sovereignty, which means authority of the people, that we the people collectively, by voting, decide how government power is going to be used. This is different than royal sovereignty, in which a king or queen, by nature of their birth, would have the authority to exercise government power. Popular sovereignty means we decide as a people. The Republican Democratic Republic comes from republicanism, the idea that we elect representatives to govern in our name. The idea here is that people are busy. You cannot be bothered with every single detail of life. So in a republic, we choose our leaders. And because it's a democracy, we vote on who those leaders are who are going to represent our interests in the government. A few other aspects that make up the United States government is the idea of limited governments, that government power is limited. There are things that government is not allowed to do. This protects you from basically an arbitrary use of power or the government simply taking away your rights. Another thing that makes up the U.S. government is an idea called federalism. What federalism means is that power is shared between the national, federal government, and the state governments. This means that sometimes the states are in charge of things, like schools, and the federal government does not really get to determine what schools are in a state. This is all designed to basically separate out power to prevent any one institution from getting too much power and possibly using it to violate rights. Then there's also the idea of separation of powers, that in our society we don't want any one person or group to be able to make, enforce, and judge laws. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. We also have checks and balances that mean that if one government branch overreaches its power or abuses its role, the other branches can stop it. So that protects individual rights. Then finally, we have the idea of individual rights, that you have things that no one can take away from you. Freedom of speech, freedom to due process in the court system, this life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness idea spelled out in the Declaration of Independence. The government of the United States is actually the Constitution. You are not loyal to a ruler, a leader, or something. You're actually loyal to the laws of the land. We're a nation of laws, not rulers. And those laws are spelled out in the United States Constitution. And the preamble of the United States Constitution has a lot to basically say about the goal of the United States government. What is government supposed to do? And the preamble says that we the people of the United States, we the people, popular sovereignty, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. And the preamble sets out the goals of the government. The government is supposed to establish justice, ensure peace inside the country, provide for a defense of the country through military, promote the general well-being of its citizens, and secure the blessings of liberty, freedoms, for not only ourselves, but for our posterity, the future generations of Americans. So where do these ideas in the Constitution come from? I want to talk about a couple of political philosophers and a couple of ideas that ended up making up the United States. The first guy is John Locke. And John Locke is an Enlightenment thinker. He was an Enlightenment thinker who thought a lot about politics and government. And he said that all humans have natural rights, rights given to them by nature, rights that governments could not take away from them. And these rights are life, liberty, freedom, and property, the ability to own things. And he said that governments should be set up to protect these natural rights. John Locke also said that the best type of government is a social contract, that people agree to live in a society under government and obey rules giving up their total freedom. You can't run naked down the street with fireworks, remember? But the reason we give up these freedoms is we agree to live with laws to better protect all of our natural rights. And so, in a social contract, you as a citizen, you have responsibilities, obligations to the state. And finally, John Locke said, all men are born free and all men are born equal. Concepts that find their way into a lot of American founding documents. And the best example of the social contract are traffic laws. There's not a policeman on every corner making sure that you obey the traffic laws. But you stop at the red light, you go the speed limit, and you follow traffic laws, because if we all didn't agree to follow traffic laws, none of us would get home safely. There'd be accidents all over the place. So traffic is a great example of how we all choose to follow the law. The next guy I want to talk about is Baron de Montesquieu. And Baron de Montesquieu was another one of these political thinkers. And he said that there were really kind of three types of government, and each of these governments required a different social principle that the society believed in. In a monarchy, Montesquieu said you need honor, because basically you need people to be loyal to the king and the crown. And so honor is what holds together monarchies. Then he said that despotic governments, basically the dictators of the world, were propped up by the idea of fear. That fear of the government or fear of force will keep people obeying laws. But then Montesquieu said that a republic, which the United States is, relies upon virtue, relies upon its citizens being willing to go out, vote, be involved in the political process, as well as be moral and use government power for right purposes and not for wrong. So another thing to talk about in a republic, talking about government, is citizenship. So what is a citizen? A citizen is a legally recognized member of a political community with both rights and responsibilities. So citizens have rights. You have the right to your freedom of speech, protections from the abuse of government, as well as due process of law in the court system. But you don't get that for free. You also have responsibilities. You are required to follow the law, vote, serve on juries, be well-informed citizens, etc. So in a republic, the idea of citizenship is very important because remember, it is the citizens who make up the government. So we're going to talk a little political science this year, and all political science is the study of governments and how they work, but also how well they work or how they don't work. And the U.S. government in history has played out in some interesting ways. First off, the Constitution limits the power of the federal government. And we're going to look at how that power has both shrunk and expanded over the course of history. Also, the Bill of Rights protects citizens from the unjust use of government power. And we're going to see how that has played out over the course of U.S. history. We're going to talk about the expansion of both the power and the role of U.S. government in the lives of citizens. And then we're also going to talk about the idea that all these high ideals and all of our laws are only as good as our will to make sure that they are enforced as a people. So here's who's going to be involved. We're going to talk about Congress, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. And what Congress does is they pass laws, they pass taxes, and they also have to approve all government spending. The president, for their parts, presidents fill many roles. They are in charge of executing laws, negotiating, leading the army, representing all Americans ceremonially, as well as guiding legislation, laws. Then finally, the Supreme Court, who, with the power of judicial review, can judge laws to either be just laws, constitutional, or unjust laws, unconstitutional. And so the Supreme Court cases have changed significantly life in the United States. So again, the separation of powers and checks and balances between these three branches, the goal is just to keep any one group from having too much power or authority. If the legislative branch makes a law that is unjust, the judicial branch can basically stop it. And there's a ton of other checks and balances that we'll talk about later in the year. So real quick, a primer on all these branches. The legislative branch is the Congress. Each state elects representatives in order to go to Washington, D.C. and make laws. There's also a state capitol and a state legislature that just makes laws for Illinois. John Boehner is the current Speaker of the House. He's the head of the House of Representatives. In the Senate, which each state gets two, the leaders right now are Harry Reid for the Democrats and Mitch McConnell for the Republicans. In the legislative branch, what they do is they pass laws, they create government programs, and also they pay for things. Congress has the power to pass bills, which are proposed laws, laws that they would like to see happen, as well as the power of the purse, that all spending must be voted on and approved by Congress. Now let's talk real brief about the executive branch. Now, the executive branch is, of course, the President of the United States and all the people who work for him. The President has a lot of different roles. Our current President is Barack Obama, but in 2016, there's going to be another election and we'll choose a new President. But the role of the President is very diverse. The President is the chief executive, responsible for carrying out laws, the chief diplomat, in charge of directing foreign policy and negotiating with other countries. The President also has to command the armed forces. He's the commander-in-chief. He also serves symbolically as our head of state and the legislative leader, in that presidents can suggest to Congress laws that they would like to see passed. So chief executive, an example of this would be President Eisenhower after Brown v. Board of Education that ruled that the law said that schools had to be integrated. To make sure that schools allowed minority students to attend, President Eisenhower at the time in the 1950s actually sent the U.S. National Guard, so he used military power in order to ensure that the law was being followed. Also, John F. Kennedy at Ole Miss University, when a man by the name of James Meredith wanted to go to school there, he sent the National Guard in order to make sure that James Meredith could go to school, because the law said that he had the right to go to school. So presidents have to make sure the law is being followed. But presidents also negotiate with other heads of state. During the Second World War, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt went and met with the leaders of Great Britain, Winston Churchill, and Joseph Stalin of the Soviet Union in order to figure out what the Allies were going to do about the Second World War. Also, Ronald Reagan, during the Cold War, went to the Berlin Wall and basically made a statement, a challenge to the Soviet Union to tear down the Berlin Wall and allow Germans to be reunited. Barack Obama is our commander-in-chief. He is the highest-ranking member of our military. It's very important that we have a civilian head of our military. See if you can figure out why. Also, Abraham Lincoln, during the Civil War, is shown here meeting with soldiers, because the president ultimately commands the armed forces. The president is also the chief of state, in that the president gets to represent Americans in a ceremonial way. Presidents award people medals, and presidents welcome foreign dignitaries such as the Queen of England, and they welcome them to the United States on behalf of all Americans. And presidents also can suggest legislation. Even though they cannot pass these laws, they can suggest that they happen. For example, Obamacare was a health law that Barack Obama was very instrumental in getting it passed. Likewise, the Bush tax cuts, Clinton welfare reform are examples of laws that get associated with the presidents who suggested them. Then finally, we have the judicial branch, the highest court of which is the Supreme Court. And this is your Supreme Court. John Roberts, who's the Chief Justice, Antonin Scalia, Anthony Kennedy, Clarence Thomas, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Stephen Breyer, Samuel Alito, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan. And here they are. These judges are the highest court in the land, and they decide if laws are violating the U.S. Constitution. This means that any laws that are unfair or unjust will hopefully be judged so by the Supreme Court, because they have the power of judicial review. That means that these justices, they get to interpret the meaning of the Constitution. For example, the Supreme Court has affirmed that a law that would ban the burning of the flag is unconstitutional, because the Constitution protects freedom of speech, and burning a flag as a political statement is free speech. Also, the Miranda Rule. The court ruled that the Constitution protects your rights even if you don't know what they are. And so the court ruled that all police officers must inform their suspects of their rights before questioning them. This is on the cop drama when they say you have the right to remain silent. Anything that you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. You have the right to the attorney. That is what is known as the Miranda rule. Because the Supreme Court said that, it wasn't fair that people did not know their rights, and so they were being exploited by police. So finally it brings us to the Bill of Rights. And in the textbook, this is on page 199 and 200. But the Bill of Rights is the protection of your rights as an American citizen, one of the most important things that we have in our country. The First Amendment protects your freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. This protects your right to free expression and free thought. The Second Amendment protects your right to keep and bear arms. Number 3 means that the government can't make you host troops in your private home. Number 4 protects you from unlawful searches and seizures. Number 5 protects you from being exploited by the justice system. It means that whatever crime you commit or are accused of, you must go through a judicial process that includes a grand jury, principle of double jeopardy, you can't be tried for the same crime twice, and self-incrimination, meaning that you don't have to testify against yourself. So this establishes a due process, a fair justice system. Number 6 means you have the right to a trial by jury. You can confront your accuser in court, and you also have the right to an attorney. Even if you cannot afford one, the state must provide you with one. Number 7 means that you can sue people in court for personal damages. It's called civil lawsuits. Number 8 protects you from cruel and unusual punishment, which is very important because you can't be tortured or treated very poorly by government officials. Also, the 9th Amendment says that you have rights that aren't in the Constitution. This means that as new things happen, your rights can be expanded. And then the 10th basically says that a lot of other things the federal government cannot do, the states will do. Don't worry about that one, we'll talk about it later. So here's what politics is going to look like in this class. We're going to look at elections. We're going to look at laws and Supreme Court cases and how the rules have changed in American history. We're going to look at taxes and how people have paid them or have tried to get out of paying them. We're going to look at the use of police and military power, as well as all these government programs and bureaucracies and institutions that shape how Americans have lived their everyday life.